Great. Well, thank you. And thank you, everybody, so many of you for staying. It must be the awards that are keeping you here and the excitement of who's going to be taking home those massive trophies and cash prizes and everything that is coming from Chris later on. A couple of reflections from me, actually, before we get started. I think, things that I've heard today and things that I've seen and how that kind of links into that future perspective. I think the first thing I want to say is how fantastic it is to see such a level of collaboration. And actually, when I look forward 2030, 2035, I think that's going to become even more important. So firstly, kind of congratulations to Chris and the team for developing the alliance. I think I spoke to a group of you a long time ago when this was first getting started. I think Matty was still at DEFRA at the time. And to see what it's like now and how it's developed. And I think that's really important because the key thing about sustainability is that everybody has to be a part of it. And you can only be a part of it if you are in the room and in the game. And so doing that and sharing and collaborating and engaging is going to be absolutely critical. So one of those kind of future things is how we get more of that. And we tear down some of the barriers and the silos that prevent kind of real system change and a real understanding of the system and kind of the solutions that are needed at system-wide level. So I think collaboration is definitely one of those things, and this is an embodiment of it, but I think we kind of have to go further and faster. I was really taken actually by Mike Berners-Lee's kind of comments around sufficiency, and that and also in the subsequent panel and that kind of issue about over-engineering and redundancy. That kind of sufficiency, do we really need all of this at this point in time? So kind of, and we were talking earlier, weren't we, Angela, about, we've got thousands of photos on our kind of, on our devices, and they're all backed up in the cloud, and it's a lot of energy kind of going into stuff that doesn't get used, maybe once every 10 years, or there's a family birthday or something, you want to embarrass the kids. So kind of just, I think that's one of those things. And then that Jevons paradox, it was a real reminder because this is something that as a sustainability professional who's kind of been involved in this a long time, I go back into the late 90s, early 2000s, just on things like transport planning and, Jevons law paradox kind of plays very much into that as well, where it's like, well, we've got a bit of gridlock on the transport system. We need to build more roads because if we do that, we free up and we become more efficient. And of course, what do? We just create more capacity, and that capacity gets eaten up and we still have the problems and it gets even more magnified. And I think that whole kind of moving through efficiency, 20% efficiency in terms of energy, but doubling the amount of consumption because we're doing twice as much, actually is a bigger impact overall. So it's kind of looking at these things in the round and being kind of true to ourselves around what we're dealing with. So those are some of the things that came to my mind as I was kind of engaging a little bit earlier. But I'd like to kind of move on to hear some of the reflections from our panelists and asking what their key takeaways are, first of all. What have you learned today, Anthony, that's kind of made you sit up and take note and think, kind of realise that and the future implications? It'd be good to kind of get that perspective from them.
So I think what's been great is we've covered so much ground today. I mean, I imagine most people in this room's heads are already quite full, and we've really gone the full spectrum of sustainability, not just focused on carbon, and we've not only focused on AI. I've been really pleased with the breadth of the conversation. I guess two particular areas for me. One's sort of selfishly, I've named my business Circularity First. So hearing people talk about circularity by default, like by design, that it's taken as the first decision and it's embedded all the way through, I think is really good that that's sort of coming into its own now, that's becoming a real thing in most organizations. The second thing, and I think, if there was something we could have probably spent the whole day on, is really trying to get the intricacies of what happens in the full supply chain when we talk about technology. We've covered about resilience and risk, we've talked about modern day slavery. I think so much of what happens before we get technology in our hand, it's still a bit opaque for most. And that's where a lot of the impacts and the complexities lie. So, I think, we can all continue to invest in learning and understanding more about the supply chain and what it actually takes to make this technology that we so rely on now. And I think I certainly learned some things there, and I'm sure everyone else did too.
Do you think we've got the skills and capability to really drive circularity by design in our design engineers?
No, not yet. No, absolutely not yet. And I think, again, we're missing lots of different pieces of knowledge, but without being a spoiler of what I'll probably talk about next, it's an inevitability.
Okay. I will hold that thought. Tom, from a DAFRA perspective or government perspective?
So first of all, I think today's been a really great day, and I think just getting all together in the same place, seeing people, meeting people in real life and everything, just been a great kind of chance for us all to connect again. I couldn't help but reflect. We had this event last year in the same venue, but we were in the kind of little room downstairs last year. I think there were probably less than 50 people at the event last year. The panels had several people on multiple panels 2 or 3 times. I think, Ishmael, you were on a couple, weren't you? Mark Butcher was on at least 2 and went out to do another event and be on a panel like that and came back to be on this one. So it was a real kind of a much smaller scale session. And even the range of topics we covered of it were not as kind of expansive and strategic as we've talked about today. And if you want a real kind of indication of the increased profile and the real step change that we've had this year, so this year, the government keynote was delivered by the minister. Last year, it was delivered by me. So that's a real kind of, it's a real step change.
Durability, though. Durability, Tom, come on.
So that's all been a real kind of indication of the momentum that is building around some of this stuff. And I think that's not in isolation, though. That's on the back of a year of GDSA expanding, of lunch and learns pretty much every month. The podcast just started up recently, LinkedIn page. And I think the nice thing is this year we've been able to refer to stuff that has been delivered and produced by the working groups. People have talked about some of the recommendations, white papers and stuff, and there are some coming soon. So I think it's that feeling of kind of things starting to be a bit more tangible that's been motivating. But I think equally it's been a realistic day, and I think people have acknowledged the challenges and some of the constraints that we're working under too, which is important. I don't think it's been a kind of pie in the sky type of conversation.
So what's really changed over the last 12 months that's accelerated this and got more people engaged? Is it the Lydia
The Lydia
effect?
factor, that's the word for it. I think definitely we've consciously gone out and invited people in that perhaps thought they weren't, welcome, or they weren't welcome, but they were eligible before. So we've made sure that we go out to third sector and academic organisations. But I think a lot of it is the work of the Alliance members themselves who've referred other people to it or suggested other members and things and kind of passed that on. And that's been, the LinkedIn presence has been really helpful. And again, it's, I think, members themselves that have really helped to get that growth.
Fantastic. Angela, what are your reflections?
Going to be slightly controversial.
Brilliant.
There are so many people in this room that care about this topic and want to drive it. I work in a company which has had driving sustainably a part of its core through its manufacturing processes. We're not perfect, but it's fundamentally embedded into the DNA of Dell. So there's an awful lot of people here in this room that care and are pushing those messages and are trying to create change and are creating change, but just not at the speed we need. You look at Professor Berners-Lee's chart of where we're going on climate change is going in the wrong direction. We haven't stopped anything yet. And it's how do we take the amazing ideas and brain power and the things that DEFRA have initiated and get them across all of government, because lots of departments are doing things in pockets but not wholesale. And how do we get industry to join as well? I'm a small voice in Dell in the UK. So I have an impact, but I don't have a huge impact and I don't have a global impact. How do we take what the foundations from here and really drive them forward?
It's a good question. I'm going to throw it back to these. How do we do that? How do we accelerate that? How do we bring that to bear in those kind of the bigger decision makers in the organisations that may be kind of represented in the room?
So I've thought about this quite a bit. So I'm part of the Climate Council at Tech UK. And as I took up a role as a co-chair with some other co-chairs here today, we talked about this. And I think as an industry, we have to challenge ourselves more. So sort of peer-to-peer challenge. We have to sort of collate that across industry. It's too easy when we're sort of divided up as individuals to kind of dodge the difficult questions. So we see it as sort of a high challenge, high support kind of scenario for the tech industry itself to lean in and help people that are struggling or don't know how to or aren't confident about disclosing or reporting or don't know how to shift their manufacturing processes to lean on others. So I think it's the industry's own requirement to solve this problem.
And is it up for the challenge?
I think it mostly...
You pause.
Okay, so I think...
Well,
okay, let me be realistic. So at the moment, there isn't the pressure to change in most scenarios. The pressure is on delivery, the pressure is on value, the pressure is on for shareholders. But that doesn't mean that people don't care, and that doesn't mean that more positive pressure with that support can't be applied. So I'm positive that we can make greater change, but is the impetus there without anyone doing anything? No.
And just to add that, I mean, I think the answer to kind of what can we do to help deliver that has to be in the strategy. And we've structured the day around the kind of high-level themes of that. And I think we've got some really good extra content and sort of consideration to play into it. And still, if people have got other ideas and thoughts on those topics, we still want to get that feedback. But I think that the point of putting a strategy together is that we can start to prioritize the key things that we want to work on, so that we're not all doing different things and kind of running around. We've got a few key priorities, and we can talk about things like reporting. To Mark's point earlier, we could talk about procurement and how we can tackle that effectively, and things like capability building, not just in digital but kind of across other functions and stuff. And I think up to now, not having that clearly defined and set out somewhere has made it harder to kind of be effective. But I think that that's certainly what we want the strategy to deliver later this year.
Can I just add one thing? I think also, and not to blow smoke, leading by example, actually having the case studies out there, proving that this stuff can be done. There are lots of point examples around where sustainability is making a positive difference. We've just got to get better at talking about them. Someone made the point earlier that the tech industry has one of the biggest marketing budgets. So we've got to kind of temper that with the stories of okay, there are other ways we can do this. Like, it's still using technology. We're not negative against technology. It's just how do we do it, right? And being positive about those case studies. And I think DEFRA's doing a really good job of that.
And then maybe using some of those examples to then embed back into the processes of how we engage with government, to go, this is what we expect vendors, partners, our supply chains to be acting as.
Yeah.
Because every organisation working into government is trying to sell something. Yeah. We've talked about that earlier. And they're always chasing shareholder value, which for them is more sales. But what if actually the pressure came through in the process to go, the sale has to be genuinely sustainable. It has to tie in with our risk profiles and think about future climate impacts, which will create bigger risk profiles, and layer it in a way in the governance so that the suppliers have to turn up being innovative and creative and delivering outcomes. And the examples give us the blueprint of how it can be done, so we get to add more value quicker.
How much courage is needed, or bravery, from the customer in order to create the conditions where that innovation and really kind of kicks in and leapfrog over the tried and tested, the well-known, so that we don't just keep having this process of incrementalism? Is that a fair kind of question to ask? Are we up for that?
Certainly from my point of view, like in the public sector and outside of it, like the business case of sustainability is actually there. It's just not shouted about or showcased. So actually, some of the big drivers don't have to be because we feel like it's the right thing. Fundamentally, seeing the lens through a circular view or other views where simply it's just better. It's just education, right? It's awareness. We have customers that fundamentally have incorporated this as a core principle. It's just as how they do business now. It's just not mainstream yet.
Cool. Okay, let's fast forward 2030, 2035. What does the government's digital estate and services look like over the next 5, 10, 15 years? And kind of something that kind of really niggles me, sorry, I've written it down, is, what do we need to do to ensure it contributes to delivering solutions to our sustainability challenges rather than magnifying the problems? Because we've kind of heard about that. And I think it is this, how can we really help this to solve the challenges that we've heard about? They're across all different environmental media, they're across kind of aspects of society and human rights. How do we use the technology to solve these problems rather than constantly kind of looking over our shoulder at kind of the materials or the energy consumption, the carbon intensity, the water consumption? How do we kind of get that balance right?
Okay, so look, I think there are two major factors that I think are going to kind of determine where government needs to go from a digital services and infrastructure point of view, and in the context of what we're talking about. And I think that's energy and materials, to your point. Let's start with energy. I think we're going to be in quite a tricky place with energy availability and cost over the next 5 to 10 years. We have ambitiously put forward that we want to be leaders in AI in Europe. Okay, we know that's going to drive massive increases, probably a doubling of energy consumption in data centers. Okay, we also have the ambitious target to build more than 300,000 homes in this country year on year. It's absolutely the right ambition. I fully support it. But those two things are in a bit of conflict, particularly in regional pockets where the energy doesn't exist. Okay. But, I'm quietly positive that we are building out more renewables. We are investing in small modular reactors, which is supposed to particularly help like AI hubs and things like that. So let's be positive that maybe in 10 years we start to kind of catch up on that. But we have a problem in the meantime of demand still exceeding supply from an energy use point of view. So what can we do was your question. Like specifically, I think government's got a really interesting role about how it can showcase what is possible. One of the key areas to focus on is buildings. The built environment's responsible for about 40% of carbon emissions worldwide, but buildings are probably the least digitized, the least efficient things that we have. If we think about incorporating IT networks really early in the design phase, when we're thinking about refreshing buildings or even building new buildings, we can actually converge energy, light, heat, data, and security onto one network. And we can granularly and intelligently control all of the devices on that network to massively actually reduce energy. Not efficiency, actual net reduction in energy consumption of something like 30%. Now, I'm not recommending that you force replace all the equipment in all buildings, but as you go through that process naturally over the next sort of 5 to 10 years, there's a massive opportunity to win there, and government can lead the way and showcase that. So let's be positive. Let's say that energy will find a way. Right? I actually think probably the bigger issue is materials. And materials sort of interwoven with kind of the manufacturing process. So already today, demand is massively exceeding supply for things like memory and processing units, right? I think most people are kind of aware of that. We should be fairly familiar with this. We all went through Chipageddon. Anyone remember those terms? Anyone remember that? And look, manufacturing capacity will catch up in the next 2 to 3 years, right? Where's the problem? The problem lies is that we've now got two of the fastest growing sectors competing for the same resources. The digital sector, including AI, and the clean energy sector are chasing after the same materials. And the growth trajectories for both of those are going to exceed our ability to make those materials available. So I ask you the impossible question. Which one are we not going to do?
Can't answer that, but I can. But I think it frames the question really clearly. But I think on the kind of question about one thing we haven't covered an awful lot today is the kind of whole tech for goods angle to some of this and how technology can be part of the answer. And I know that's, we need to be careful about how we just think that's going to solve everything. But I mean, Paul Mukherjee, I think, is here, DEFRA CTO, and Paul has an innovation team who maintain a kind of tech radar looking at some of that stuff coming down the line. And I think something we want to maybe tap into a bit more of GDSA members' expertise is how they can kind of help do a bit of a horizon scan about what some of that stuff looks like, supplement what we have already in DEFRA. And I think, Chris, we were talking about that earlier, weren't we, about how we want to kind of move that lens from just being about stuff that DEFRA can use to stuff that kind of DEFRA's outcomes could be supported by, whether that's DEFRA using it or people in the real world, as it were.
Definitely, and I think the energy. I mean, you talked about energy. I think it's kind of power, isn't it? It's an electrical power and that transition, because it's not just about how we use it in buildings, but it's also transport. So, we need to kind of, the projection is we need to double the amount of power, electrical power by 2050 to accommodate all the different use cases as we electrify the economy. And at the same time, we're going to have significant variable power. So kind of not continuous, it's going to be not dispatchable. So with renewables, we're going to have massive energy gluts on the system. And we're also going to have times where it's kind of really tight. So I think kind of technology has a real role to play in that, but equally it's kind of part of the potentially kind of contributes to that challenge as well.
Actually, when Anthony was talking about starting it from the building upward point of view, quite a few years ago, there were a number of data center providers that were starting to build on repurposing the excess heat and so on out of the data centers as well. We haven't harnessed things like that. Dell was part of a project in Stockholm. The data center provider did a lot of the work. We provided pieces to go in the data center. But by taking out the outflow of the heat generated by all of the technology running, they were powering something like 340 homes in an area of Stockholm over a year. We don't, because we've got a lot of old buildings, we don't have that technology built into them. How do we retrofit that so that everything that we are using, which can bring good in lots of places, is also then adding additional good in by us not wasting the resource that it also has as its outflow?
Definitely. I mean, I was with the board of Milton Keynes Hospital Trust doing a session with them, and they're tapping into district heating systems. So it's kind of how you build district heating systems, how then that kind of that heat can be part of a kind of a broader contribution to society and actually kind of start to kind of close some of these loops. I mean, you started off very boldly, if I would say, saying how kind of wonderful Dell is in terms of, you've got this embedded, you're doing it really well. I'm paraphrasing.
I didn't say we were perfect.
You were far too much. No, you didn't say you were perfect. No, we're all on a journey.
Yeah.
So, kind of, what does it look like from a tech manufacturer, an equipment manufacturer, and a supplier? What does the next 5-10 years look like? What's going to be different for people in this room, for the user base, for people in government? What can we expect to see that's going to be transformational?
Yeah, so we know that we need to be much more flexible and modular in the way we create things, and we're already on that journey. I think probably when we came to the GDSA about 2 years ago, we brought a concept product with us, which we called Project Luna. And it was a laptop that you could literally take apart like it was pieces of Lego and then put new parts into it. So it was fully modular, it was fully adaptable, and that's where we are going. And that will start this year, but it will evolve over the whole product ranges. That as Intel bring out a new chip, because demands are coming through the marketplace for pieces, you can take out the current chip and put in a new one. You keep the chassis, you're avoiding having to rebuild and remanufacture a new chassis, you're just dropping things in and out. The marketing team hates me calling it Lego, but it's an easy way to describe that you can adjust to suit. I think more of us as manufacturers need to be able to do that. Things need to be more serviceable. They need to be remotely fixable by customers, so you're also then not worrying about transporting parts and an engineer to somewhere to fix something. It's more, it's more adaptable for me to follow a YouTube instruction and actually do it myself. Those are the kind of areas that we're trying to limit the amount of manufacturing we have to do, make it more accessible, make it more upgradable simply, and then make sure there is a full circular life cycle for those parts as they come back. And we currently recycle at least 50% of a product when we're manufacturing is made of recycled items. There's still a lot more to do.
Okay. And Tom, how ready is government to buy in, but to kind of lean in and help to create this opportunity to accelerate that? If this is part of dealing with the material challenges that we have and access to resources, then government has a role to play. You help to create markets and mainstream. Is this something that you are kind of?
I think so. And I think one of the encouraging things about the minister's speech was the number of references to other kind of policy initiatives that are going on, other work happening across DEFRA and government in a way that, again, last year we weren't part of that conversation. So things like the circular economy growth plan and stuff, that's not just IT, that's UK wide, and the task force, sorry, Anthony, yeah, and the critical mineral strategy, all that sort of stuff that's not just us talking about that. That's kind of policy officials across government, and it was good to see a lot of people on these panels from those kind of other policy teams, and I think using that lever will be very important. And just quickly on that kind of broader point, I think this thing about efficiency is, to your point, Anthony, I think we're nearly at the point where we can put some quite striking illustrative numbers around what some of the potential cash savings are to taking a more coordinated approach, which would be, I think, really, really powerful.
Cool. I've got my note, 2 minutes. So I want to very, very quickly touch on kind of the issue about digital poverty and the digital divide. Did we see this as being a bigger challenge going forward? So if we, as we kind of accelerate towards the delivery of government services through digital means, are we kind of confident that we not going to leave people behind?
So I think there is a risk there, and I think it's an unacknowledged risk, and particularly governments moving towards digital ID, single front door, like that everything is going to drive through there, and it's going to be self-service and supported in charge. Like as we go through tech cycles, and as those tech cycles become shorter, it becomes more and more expensive for people to keep up. It's that whole keeping up with the Joneses thing. I need the newest phone, and applications no longer work on the older versions. You can't upgrade the iOS, therefore you can't get the application. So we've got to be really careful not to leave people behind. But there are programs of work, a number of them were listed today. I was with one yesterday called the Next Path Consortium that are fundamentally leaning in to try and challenge this problem and to make sure some of the tech that organizations no longer need gets into the hands of people who really need them and can help close that gap.
I agree, and I think there's a real opportunity. I think I'll just a slight word of caution. I think is somehow we need to make sure that we're kind of managing the potential tension between device donation and sweating and making sure we keep things as long as we can, which is part of our approach too, and not just giving stuff that is completely useless. So there's a thing there for us to work out. But I agree, it's a good thing to work through.
I want to be part of helping to make sure that we limit that digital poverty problem. We have thousands of laptops alone out with customers around the globe. They do get recycled, they do come back. They can have a second life helping people that maybe can't buy the latest gadget. And we need to use then with the software vendors, make that accessible so that the fact that it's an older device doesn't necessarily limit their ability to access modern tools and applications that they need.
Fantastic. So final question, hopeful, optimistic, or still kind of scared, witless that actually we can't kind of tackle this challenge?
No, I'll reiterate what I said earlier. I think actually the solutions that we need are already there. We're just not adopting them yet.
Yep. Ditto.
Ditto.
Optimistic, I just want us to bring more people with us. What this has started is amazing. How do we get everybody else really running with us and make it that priority in every corporate, that everybody's looking to do things differently and better?
Fantastic. Well, thank you, panelists. Really enjoyed the conversation. I love Chipageddon. As a northerner, I had a kind of different concept. And so probably kind of making sure we all speak the same language of sustainability and, driving kind of a better future is definitely where we're on. So thank you, everybody. And I will be handing over to Chris.